Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. Today, we're going to talk about a very, I think, underappreciated corner of comics that I've always been fascinated about, not just in comics, but in really all um, word-based art forms. We're going to talk about translations. I'll give the I thought about preparing and going and finding the different translations to be able to do it, and I decided not to because I hate the bad translations so much. But one of my favorite books is The Little Prince, and as far as I'm concerned, in the United States, the only legitimate version of The Little Prince is the Catherine Woods translation. Um, because every other translation I've read just sucks the life and the whimsy out of it. You know, so like literally when I pick up a copy of The Little Prince, I turn to like page 3 where the Catherine Woods translation, and I always remind myself for people that I'm talking about that Exupery was bilingual and he was alive when Catherine Woods translated The Little Prince. So he clearly approved her translation as well, or at least one can assume that he would have. But in that first opening segment, there's just one of the most beautiful lines ever. It's grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to always and forever be explaining things to them.
Hmm.
And I've seen translations of that as boring as grown-ups don't understand and children always have to explain.
Yeah,
And I'm
French.
like, that's not the same.
Yeah, French is particularly challenging, I think. I'm just going to jump in before even getting into introductions here, because French does have, and especially I think maybe modern French writers like Exupéry or Raymond Queneau, who I'm a big fan of, Georges Perec, and a lot of the writers that I like, have a kind of, yeah, like you said, sort of a whimsical style. And in to capture that in English without it degenerating into a kind of cutesiness or a kind of stuffy archness is extremely challenging.
Right.
And even the good translations don't, and then of course, well, there's lots of obviously considerations, but to when I was able to finally read, Queneau and Saint-Exupéry in French and be able to appreciate the tone and
You're
say,
going to have to
oh,
teach me
that's what
how
it's
to
supposed to sound
pronounce
like.
that because I love the way it sounds when you say it, and I don't know how to say it that way. So,
Antoine de
Saint-Exupéry,
Saint-Exupéry, I believe, unless sometimes I think I'm
the
mixing
Saint.
the X, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay,
Yeah, there's like a lightness to their writing
yeah.
um, that can come across as sort of like really cloying and cutesy if it's not handled right in English.
Right. So that was Matt Madden, the author of Six Treasures of the Spiral and 99 Ways to Tell a Story, and many other fantastic books. Also joining me is
Always numbers in
Chris.
this.
Well, no, because drawing words and
True.
reading pictures doesn't. I mean,
Yeah,
even
X
the
labor. I
second
mean,
one, you
X could
just
be
called
the
the
number 10,
advanced
but
one.
yeah,
Um, and Cris Siqueira, the co-owner of Lion's Tooth in Milwaukee, one of the most fantastic independent comic and bookstores in the world. Um, and Matt translates from French to English from time to time, and Chris has been translating from English to
yeah.
Portuguese for the Brazilian market for many years.
Yes, since 19 comics since 1990. Oh, I don't want to say it. 1990. Yeah.
Since the last century, we can stop there.
Mhm.
So, um, so yeah, how's it going, guys? And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
I
very
Thanks.
say us because Eddie's trying to steal my microphone again.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good. It's funny because I actually have not been doing a lot of translation for the last year or so. I did one thing earlier this year, and I have some other things that are sort of on long-term hold. but yes, it kind of goes through phases of being a bigger and smaller part of my daily activities. But
Yeah, same here. My translating career is divided into I did do a lot of like corporate translation, and that's how
mm,
I supported myself like until not that long ago, until like about 5 years ago. But I had a whole career in the late 90s and the early 2000s of translating most of Joe Sacco's work to Portuguese, translating Dan Clowes, like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron, Snoopy. I did translate some Schultz, which is like my claim to
Oh,
fame.
wow.
I know. And so I did that for, I translated the Metamorphoses by Peter Cooper. So I did a lot of translations back then. And then I kind of came back to it uh, with more recently because I took on translating Gilbert Hernandez's works in Portuguese. So I translated Human Diastrophism, Beyond Palomar, Luba and Her Family. And then I started also kind of suggesting. So I said that Schultz was my claim to fame. My actual claim to fame is that I suggested that the Brazilian publisher Veneta translated Nathan Cowdery, the British comics artist, and they did publish Crash Site in Brazil, and I got to translate that too. But more recently, I translated Acting Class, my New York Diary, which is being released in Brazil, and I think it's because Julie Doucet got attention in Angoulême, so like it
mhm,
kind of like brought back interest in that,
sure.
and also Not the Israel My Parents Promised Me, which was Harvey Pecker's last book, and it talks about the Israel Palestine situation. So they also published that in a hurry, and I translated that real quickly too.
And Chris, are these mainly all with the same publisher in Brazil, or do you work with
Always
different?
the same people, same person. I'm a comics artist myself, and this is the person I will work most closely with. I'm doing my first graphic novel right now, and he's the one who's gonna publish it in Brazil. So he
Oh,
publishes.
cool.
Yeah, he used to publish a magazine called Animal
Hmm.
that had a lot of European works translated to for the Brazilian market in the
Yeah,
80s and 90s. So it was an anthology, but it had everybody, kind of like um, a lot of the Italians, like Mattiotti, and like like a lot of the
sure.
Pazienza. I remember like I loved. So yeah, he
Oh
did.
yeah, like the Frigidaire
Yes, Bridget.
brew. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, I haven't seen that. I've had friends. I think we talked on email that Fabio Zimbres has been a correspondent friend of mine for many years, and we've traded stuff back and forth since the '90s. And he sent me some banana con chiclete. There was like a
Chiclete com banana.
chiclete
Yeah,
con banana
yeah.
that was from that era as well. I guess around that era, and of course the mini tontos that there was a mini comic series that he published. It's great stuff.
The Chiclete com banana were it's all Brazilian authors, which is like like that was, and it
Right.
came right after the dictatorship. It's funny that you remember that because one of the things that I do in my comic is to mix photos with, and they used to do fumetti, like
Mm,
photo, like in
right, right.
photo novelas, like photo soap opera.
Yeah,
you know and I like this was like it was everywhere in Brazil when I was a kid, and Chiclete com Banana used to make it. They came right after the end of the dictatorship, so there was a lot of like shock value.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, like El Vibra in Spain at that era, sort of the, the dizzy freedom.
yes, yes, and it's kind of like, yeah, well, like everything that you couldn't say before. And it's like it doesn't age super well because it's all from like a male perspective,
Yeah,
and very influenced by Crumb too, and um so it's kind of like, and the whole, like, even the Frigidaire people, like if you read some of the stuff, you go like, man,
Yeah.
this is basically like slice of life date rape. you know
For sure, there's like the value of shock value changes over time in historical context, and there's a very
Yes.
male problematic sexual politics to a lot of obviously Crumb's been widely spoken of in these terms, but
yeah,
through the 80s and 90s and indie comics around the world, which is mostly young middle class men that are writing about doing the most transgressive stuff they can do, and that often ends up
right.
being horribly misogynist because it becomes the idea of sex becomes a sort of political metaphor, but
Yeah,
it's also still misogyny, you know.
yeah, and
Right.
I
So
think
yeah.
it's like, it's not unlike, I love Robert Crumb, and I'm very happy to report that it's okay to like him again, thanks to Dan Nados.
hmm hmm
When we opened Lion's Tooth, a lot of like the youth was like, "Oh no, Crumb." I'm like, "Oh no, you don't get to say 'oh no, Crumb' in my establishment." I love Crumb, and I think it's like, to me, he's the id of comics, and like it's a anyway, but the Mad magazine was a little bit like this because it catered to the boys, and the boys
hmm
couldn't buy the dirty magazine, so we had
Yeah.
so many, you know a lot of comedy is like that.
Yeah.
It's like a comedy, but so I think that I'm very glad to see work that is produced now, because like even Crash Site is a lot of shock value in it, but like you said, the value of shock value, it's like it's for our time, so it's not jarring, like
Yeah.
you read something from another time that you go, whoa, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Chris, your varied output actually led me to the one question that I already had in my head, because Matt, the two books of yours that I've read in translations, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciations on both of these because I don't do French pronunciation very well. The Zabim sisters.
hmm
You want to do that
Sure.
right? Is that right? Or
The Beam
you can
Sisters.
correct me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And is it Piero?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, one is in the French Caribbean,
hmm
and done by a French Caribbean author, and the other is more um, urban
Yeah.
France,
South of
and
France. Yeah.
I'm certain that there are different dialects, there are different, and Chris, the my framing for you is more like when you're approaching Charles Schultz, you're going to approach it differently from Dan Klaus. Their use of language is different. So talk to me about um, the
Yeah,
challenges, the joys, the whatever of taking.
yeah,
It's not as simple as French to English. It's this French to some semblance of English to get that feeling across. It's not as easy as English to it's this English to try to replicate that in Portuguese. Um,
like, so a lot of it, a lot of comics have a lot of slangs, right? And I think so it's, if you're going to translate a comic that was made in the 90s, and you're going to use slang from the 90s, unless they're really trying to do that, you try to use slang of our times. The reason that I work with this publisher only is I did a so I said that I did most of Joe Sacco's books, and Footnotes in Gaza. I don't remember if it was Footnotes in Gaza. I translated Footnotes in Gaza. No, yeah, I translated the Fixer and Notes from a Defeatist. Footnotes in Gaza, I reviewed somebody else's translation, because I don't know if you have that here too. They have the translation is blind. There's a blind review by another translator. It's a
No, I think that should be industry standard, but in my limited experience, I've never had that happen. I've never had my stuff reviewed, and I've never had anyone ask me to review their translation. I think that's a really good idea, though.
Yeah, that's what they do in Brazil. Like, so you can be either the reviewer. So I was the reviewer of like Maggie the Mechanic, for instance,
Mm,
because they used an older version of it. But usually you always have like a second pair of eyes. And I did that for a different for footnotes in Gaza for a different publisher, and they had a manual of style that was very strict,
mm,
and that does not work for comics.
right.
You can't put a manual of style. I even because there's a lot of like things that would like theoretically be grammatical mistake,
Yeah.
but they're not mistakes. They're just like, it's like putting the word ain't, in
Yeah.
English. So you couldn't use words like that. And it was really jarring because I had to review it based on the manual, and it was very stiff. It
That's
was
awful. Yeah, that makes no sense at all.
it was horrible.
Yeah.
And the thing about like Joe Sacco, because him himself is working through translators like in those books. And one of the things he said is that he because I used to I did a lot of interviews with cartoonists in the 90s too. You see everything happening in the 90s. And then I rekindled and redid these interviews many years later. But what Joe Sacco said, I think in one of those conversations, was that he didn't want he wanted the people that were interviewed to talk with good grammar, because he didn't want it to sound like he's uh, uh, like they're speaking in broken English in a way that makes them seem stupid, right?
Mm,
That's a journalist approach to kind of like the translation. So even if the person communicated something in broken English, you can like, uh, or if they're speaking a different language, it's like it's horrible in movies when they do that. The person, it just has an accent.
I
It's
mean, th this
yeah.
this actually reminds me just like my autistic brain that goes to non sequiturs. Sammy Sosa, who speaks English, famously only spoke through a translator to Congress when they were doing the steroid hearings. And everybody's like, "Oh, you speak English. This is just," and like every lawyer was like, "Are you out of your mind? Of course he's using a translator. You're not gonna present yourself in front of Congress in not your native language."
Mm, mm.
I don't know about
There's too
that
much idiom. There's too
anymore.
much
Yeah.
room for, you're
Yeah.
under oath.
Right.
I think that I mean it as a person living with being Brazilian full time and living with an accent full time, uh,
Right.
I think that there's like I will say a lot of nonsensical things because I will say Brazilian expressions in the middle of something, or something may not be
Right.
constructed the right way. But I think I would speak to Congress in my own voice, because I can put the intonation in it, and I would never trust it. Never trust a translator. I would probably interrupt the translator. That's not what I said.
Yeah.
No. But
Yeah.
but
That's
back,
a fraught
yeah,
situation no matter what.
yeah. But back to the thing about the style, that to your question, uh this publisher that I work with gives me a lot of freedom. So I get to adapt what I want to adapt. Now, Schultz has a history in Brazil. So the names, and so you need to know what those, there's kind of like the Schultz manual, right? What
Sure.
the names of the characters are in Portuguese, And so this is true for a lot of like comic strips, because they have been translated so many times, and they have like, or franchises, because there's the names that you have to respect. The fun part for me is when it's Love and Rockets, and I'm the one making that manual. So I'm
Mm,
the one deciding if what names are gonna be translated or not. So that is the fun part for me, because even if I stop translating it, the public has a frame of reference and a place to start. Like,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't heard of that. I mean, I would hope that like Fantagraphics or IDW or some of these publishers that are doing kind of regular series of stuff in translation um, would have like I believe Mafalda is being translated now for the first time into English.
whoa, the entire
And
thing, the entire thing. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, so I would think you'd want to be careful about the format there, and if it's a long-term project, and various translators work on it. But you know, uh, Chad, you mentioned at the very beginning that translation is sort of underappreciated, and that goes kind of every step of the way of the whole process of translation, including the fact that yeah, you don't really have a lot of editing going on. You don't have style guides in the U.S. that I know of, and I've worked with three or four publishers. Um, yeah, I mean there are a lot of things that can go wrong and fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
It's kind of up to us translators to some extent to just be our own best policemen and reach out to other people. Like one thing that's been really cool for me, I've been translating. I mean, the Zabim sisters came out in 2008, I think, and that was my first full book. But I did some other shorter comics from French in the early 2000s, and actually Fabio Zimbres has a great comic that I'll just give the English title, which is the Apocalypse According to Dr. Zoig, which I translated back then, like in the 2000s, and was published a few years ago and by Fantagraphics in their in Eric Reynolds' Now anthology. But anyway, so which is to say that I've been doing it for a long time, but kind of like on my own as kind of a side project. And it's really in the last like 2 or 3 years, I've really made an effort to reach out to other translators and become part of that community because it feels more and more necessary when this kind of stuff comes up. The questions of consistency, on what are people getting paid, what kind of contracts are we signing? There are there's lots of gray stuff that it's in the interest of publishers who are not bad people for the most part, but it's in the interest of the powers that be,
So in
to sort
Brazil,
of
we have
divide
a
and conquer a little
union.
bit.
We have a union in Brazil, Matt. We
Oh,
have
great.
a union that you can consult online
Mm.
what the price, what the the the
Yeah,
price.
what the page and word rate is. That's
Yeah,
great.
even if you're not a part of the union, you just go there and they have
Mm.
per word, per, like what they call laudas. I don't know how to say it. Like it's a unit of
Well,
uh
Yeah.
from the
I
new
mean,
numbers.
Chris, it's like you're implying that unions are good for workers.
Yes, but
uh, in the
They are.
U.S.,
That was sarcasm.
yeah, we're far from that. But I mean, there's like two different kind of guilds or organizations, professional organizations, and I'm not a member of currently because because it is sort of a side thing. It's not my main work, but also I've talked to a few other more sort of full-time translators, and they're like, it doesn't really make a big difference to be part of it. It's better to be in touch with the community. So I have some message groups with other translators that I know. So yeah, that's all very important. Just to circle back to your initial question again about the tone, it kind of, relates to what I was saying at the beginning about how like, French, there are just so many levels of translation. So like French to English in particular, well, French to American English, even more particularly because, Raymond Queneau is widely translated, but almost all of it is by this woman, Barbara Wright, who's considered one of the great all-time translators. But and I might take some flack of some serious, translator people who listen to this, but I find her translations a little stiff because she wrote them 70 years ago, and so and she's British, so she has a very and like we were talking about uh, Saint-Exupéry, Raymond Queneau is friendly with Barbara Wright. They corresponded, and he approves of her work. So she, all props to her. But the fact is, like, language evolves and changes, an idea of what a good translation should sound like also changes. So, so there's that you know that chronological aspect to it as well. And then you mentioned that the two books that I've complete books that I've translated, uh, Ali Stophan's Zabim Sisters is set in Guadeloupe, kind of vaguely in the 80s, I guess I would say. and Baudouin's Pierrot is set outside Nice in the south of France in like the 50s or early 60s. So different time zones, different places. Baudouin, I'm fortunate enough to know and be pretty good friends with, and I've also read a lot of his work. And so he speaks with a very charming kind of Southern French accent, a little bit nasal. Sounds a little bit like Quebecois, Canadian French sometimes. Um, and but that said, so like I have his voice in my head when I'm translating to English, but there's no way you can really get the sound of his voice in English because there's a lot of narration in his books. And I also don't want to, well, he's Southern, so what do I do? Stick in like, a bunch of like Southern American slang? That's not really going to work either. And I guess my compromise there, and with Elise Stefan as well, I can't say that I particularly know what like a Guadeloupean French, like Caribbean accent sounds like, or what words are particular to it. And I used to find in his writing at least is very literary. Like his writing, the narrator of the Zabim sisters is a very kind of ironic, omniscient narrator who's sort of dipping, in a very classic novelistic sense, which is why it's such a rich book because they're these children running around on a summer day getting into trouble, and he's narrating it, or there is a narrator that's kind of like making fun, sort of poking fun of them a little. He's, gently sarcastic, but not particularly inflected. Like, I'm not going to give it some like Caribbean patois in English. That would be really grossly, offensive. So, my solution tends to be to try and keep the English as um, uninflected as I can, and let sort of vocabulary and especially the visual context bring the sort of regional or political aspects to the fore. Because I just think, and it's not a perfect solution, but I think again, using like white American Southern English tropes or sort of like a Jamaican patois in translating a French Caribbean thing would be would be really a wrong step as well.
It
So
was it was done so much in Brazil, like the even, I read The Color Purple in Portuguese before I read it in English. I read it when I was 12 years old. It was like my favorite book when I was 12. This is like it's my line for all the parents when they come to the store and go like, "Is this too adult?" I said I wouldn't know because I was reading adult stuff when I was a kid. But so if you're familiar with The Color Purple, it is the main character Celie is telling the story with an accent, and it's very very like heavy and
yeah.
written phonetically. So they did the Brazilian version of it with a similar device. And the reason that they were able to do it is because of historically the like, American fiction having this stereotyped way of Black people speaking, So that had already been translated to Portuguese in 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 a way that kind of looks like somebody from the countryside almost. That's
Mm.
another thing. Like Mad Magazine would do a lot. Like if it's somebody from the countryside, if they would put it as a Brazilian hillbilly would speak.
Yeah.
It's completely normalized, completely
Yeah.
normalized. And so The Color Purple was, and I'm so curious because now many years later, I'm like, I haven't read it in Portuguese for so many years, how awful it must have been, like the first version of it that
Yeah.
I read. But so for what I think that the translator who has freedom also has my favorite translating device, that is the note from the translator, in
Hmm.
which is when I get to correct if Gilbert Hernandez says the year of a movie wrong. I go, not 42. It's note of the translator.
Right.
Gilbert is wrong. It's 1943. Anyway, but Gilbert was writing the thing before there was the internet to Google it. So
Yeah.
I will. I will. He knows much more about movies than I do.
He might have been referencing like the Roger Ebert book, and it was really their proofreader that messed
Right.
up.
There you go. But yeah. So, so in Gilbert's world, he has a character Fritzy who has lisp,
Yeah,
and that works in English because it puts the th there.
yeah,
It does not work in Portuguese. It's not a sound that exists in
right.
Portuguese. So I take the shortcut to say, because if I did it phonetically in Portuguese, it would be, and Fritz is kind of impossible to read in English sometimes for because of the all the
Yeah,
X's being replaced by th. But it would seem so weird. So I just put Fritz has a lisp.
yeah, yeah.
The first time that she talks in the book, and whenever the lisp is referenced. So you have it's good to work with a publisher that lets you do stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I think that yeah, I think you have to be judicious with a translator note, but I do think they're useful, especially not so much like word for word notes, but like something like that, like a list can't be translated. I translated Kathleen Milly's book. I've done several of her books for like an online for this thing called Europe Comics that does sort of digital editions that aren't actually commercially available. They're sort of done as spec to sell the rights. Uh, and one I'm spacing on the title because it's been so many years ago now that I did this one, but it was about growing up in the French countryside and developing a love for gardening and plants and stuff. And her work is always full of a lot of literary allusions and quotes and stuff. Which before the internet would have been even harder. I'd have to go spend all my days in the library looking up French
Yeah,
editions of Rabelais and stuff. But in that book, I talked to editors, and there was just like a bunch of cultural references. And I lived in France for 4 years, and it turns out that where she grew up is not too far from where I was living. So there's some pretty specific pop culture references, so like tourist attractions and stuff that I knew readers were not going to get, and I didn't want to I couldn't fit it in the word balloon because, of course, we have that constraint when you're translating. You can't just add a
I was going to
paragraph
ask about
explaining
that.
something.
Right.
You got to make everything fit with what you're working with. So I had, it wasn't long, but it was like maybe like a sort of one-page kind of glossary in the back with some of the personalities and places and like food, types of food that she kind of referenced that it shouldn't slow down. In the course of reading something naturalistically, you don't, oh, what's that, pop singer
right.
she's talking about? I never heard of him. I got to stop and have a footnote and explain it. But
Yeah.
it's nice to have that, I think, in the back of the book. We're like, oh, fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah,
So I think there's
sometimes
different
they're
ways that
long
can be
ones.
employed as a way to sort of
Yeah.
give the context without replacing, a French pop singer and just say Madonna or something. And then it becomes very
Right.
Right.
bland and
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
internationalized in a way that's unhelpful.
Yes.
Just because I have the internet, was that the great outdoors to
Yes,
you?
exactly. Great outdoors. Yeah.
And it is available at europecomics.com
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can
for
still. They closed. They had
well, it
a
says you can buy it for
licensing operation for a few
749
years.
euros.
Okay. Yeah.
It might only be the digital. Oh, wait a minute now, because when you click through to Amazon, you can't anymore.
Yeah, I think that.
Uh,
So some of those things, a couple of those. So
oh, it is still on Google Play though.
okay. So maybe there are ways to still access that. Yeah, it's a fun one.
I
And
know for a long time they were on Hoopla too. That's what I like, is so many of the Europe comics wind up on the library app.
yeah, that's a good question if they're still available. And I know that they stopped kind of selling directly as they used to have a kind of home like a landing page where you could go and browse their
Right.
catalog, but now it's much more like designed for publishers. And I've actually had, that was like, I've done that for the last 5 years, off and on pretty steadily. And it's been a good gig because it was really like, after doing that for several years, I really feel confident saying I'm a good translator now because I've put in the hours in a way that in the past it was just like something fun that I did. And I probably have done, I don't know, 100 books or something. And maybe about 10 of them have been published in book form. Several of them by, I'm looking across the room here. NVM did Boot Black and Giant by this guy Michael, who's a Quebecois author. I translated those. Uh, Self-Made Hero in the UK has done a few of them, like
I
Blossom
love Self-Made
in
Hero.
Autumn and The Shadows. That Dark Horse did that. So some of them have trickled into the mainstream, and even got some like Blossoms in Autumn, which is Amy DeJong did the art. She's really good. I can't remember the author, the who wrote the script on that, but it's
I
about
know that book.
yeah, that got actually
Yeah.
quite a good reception when it came out a few years ago, including some nice words for my translation, which was nice.
So you just
Which is
touched
rare in
on
a translation, in a review, to see someone actually name the translator. My pet peeve about book reviews and translation is that when book reviews, and this isn't comics so much as literature, but when you read a review of a novel, it almost always has this kind of perfunctory translated into limpid prose by so and so. There's like a couple of stock phrases that that just signals that like this person has not read it in the original language, and is just like sort of sticking that in to sort of appease the contractual obligation or whatever. Not that anyone's contractually obliged to name translators, but
I mean, honestly, I wish they did. I mean, it's kind of like having audiobook readers identified because there's certainly um,
yeah, I mean,
both when there are multiple translations available, you might pick one over another based on your own personal preference and experience, but also sometimes like I will wind up trusting, and again, this is an audiobook, so it's kind of apples and oranges, but it's like, oh, this book looks kind of interesting. I don't know anything about it, but I know that I enjoy this reader.
yeah,
So what the heck?
You see,
yeah.
this
I
is
mean,
where
it's a different.
It winds up being one
this,
more thing that can
no, but
be that straw that makes you go, yes, I'm going to take the time versus not take the time.
okay, so in literature in Brazil, because all the works by the French masters and had to be translated to Portuguese, the people who would do the translator were the greater translations were the greatest poets of the time, Brazilian authors. So Clarice Lispector did translations, Carlos Drummond de Andrade did translations. It was like translations are not taken lightly in Brazil. You know what I mean? Because like if you're gonna read Baudrillard, are you gonna read it? I don't know how to say Baudrillard. I don't know how to say,
Yeah,
but
there you go.
like if you're gonna read that, who did the translation is extremely important. If you're gonna read Proust, it's
Yeah,
really important
yeah,
whose translation it is. So I think that Brazil kind of has that tradition a little bit more than here.
yeah.
Being
In France too, like you mentioned Baudelaire actually, and Baudelaire did a lot of translation himself, and Baudelaire is the reason that Edgar Allan Poe is so revered in Europe because he translated pretty much all of Poe's works into French.
exactly, like
And
it's a prestige job, right?
yeah, it the
Like it,
prestige and the I think I've been reading the Poe in French and kind of planning to go back and forth, and I haven't really formed an opinion on this, but the kind of anecdote I've heard is that a lot of French authors discover and readers discovered Poe through Baudelaire, and then they
mhm,
went and read Poe in English and it's like, oh, this guy's a terrible writer. It's actually is Baudelaire that brought him to life, which I don't
yeah.
think is the
And
case, but
but that's true about like Portuguese literature. Like Fernando Pessoa famously translated other people too.
yeah,
So so that's one part of it, right? Like that the translation is much more important. But I want to talk a little bit about the other side that is now being in America, seeing Brazilian books translated here. So I mentioned Clarice Lispector. Clarice Lispector has been translated multiple times in English, but the translation of her short stories that the translator got every possible award that you could get is what kind of brought Clarice Lispector back. This is like new directions, like the publisher has
mm-hmm.
very, very deliberate translating voices there. Another one is Machado de Assis was like posthumous. So Machado de Assis is from like, let me see. Uh, I just don't want to say because I keep
Like early 20th century.
yeah, yeah, late. Yeah, that's what I always want to say late 19th century. Yeah, he died on 1908, and that's why I bought
Okay.
it.
Oh wow.
But but Machado de Assis has been recently translated to English, and people also found out he's black, which is amazing because it's like like everybody's like, how did this happen that the biggest Brazilian writer is black? It's a paradigm shift in America and in Brazil too. Like I don't remember ever having his blackness discussed in class when we read
Yeah.
his books.
I will say also that the train, in terms of like your audiobook analogy, when I was younger and just this like discovering like Latin American, Spanish, South American literature in like, college, Gregory Rabassa was like the big translator of like Garcia Marquez and once I figure that out, then I might be in a used bookstore and find some other random author that I find a Carlos Fuentes novel or something, and it would say translated by Gregory Rabassa, and I was like, oh, and not even so much. I know it's partly like I know he's a good translator because he did Garcia Marquez, but also I know he's a translator with good taste. Like David Bellos, who translates a lot of Georges Perec and is like very into experimental French literature. If I find some obscure book and it's got his name on there, it's kind of like, if you're kind of in the know, it's like being aware of like who the backing musicians are or like the producers of cool music where you look at the label notes like, oh, it's translated by, the cover art's by this artist, it's this imprint, you sort of have this it's part of the kind of curation, deeper curation of, going beyond just the sort of marquee name of the author and the title, but really understanding the whole kind of culture of books and translation and how it's transmitted.
You're gonna get a kick out of this, you two. And I think I mentioned her to you before, Tad. Like the uh Lilian, I don't want to say her last name wrong, but there's a person in Brazil who specialized in writing. Okay, I'm almost sure it's Matsu. I don't want to say it wrong. She does lettering.
Hmm.
So she got she got the biggest award in the Brazilian convention because she's been doing this for all her life.
Hmm.
And she's one of the first people to do um, lettering that looks exactly like the person
Yeah.
uh, wrote. So she does every style, but people in Brazil, the comics fans, know beyond even translation, you know, Lilian Mitsunaga. I didn't want to say it wrong.
Hmm.
So Lilian Mitsunaga has recognition because, and I think that's because so much of what we read is adapted into Portuguese and it's made, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
and so she'll reproduce because she's an excellent artist herself. She'll reproduce the style of the person drawing, in her lettering. And I remember this was not comics used to be just like, and now it's kind of coming back to that with some people just putting like in translations just fonts.
Yeah.
It I hate that so much. I'm like, just like I think there's a profession there that
Yeah.
for
I
somebody.
mean, I will say, as an artist who has my own books translated, I do use a font for translations because uh, I don't want to translate my books multiple times in other languages, and I don't expect that small indie publishers are necessarily going to have the money to hire someone to do a good job hand lettering. So, in the
So
best cases,
so
it can be a sort of collaboration. So, like Ex Libris, my book from 2021, that Uncivilized book, when we published it in L'Association published it in France, and they did
right.
an amazing job of the lettering because they used my font for about 90% of it, but I have lots of different styles of lettering. So they like put together like a sort of dream team of like five young artists and assigned stuff out, and it was kind of fun the last few weeks before going to the printer, they were sending me PDFs of, how's this? And I would say, no, let's say, and I ended up doing some stuff myself. And it really, brought it to life. And it really shows in the final work. Um, Spanish edition, it was all um, done with my font and with a bit of hand lettering, but really nicely done
Even oh, go ahead.
by it's by the designer who's also a cartoonist whose name I'm blanking on right now. But he used my font, but then he also like tweaked it and put in his own stuff and did really inventive work.
Even titles, you know what I mean? Like, and the reason that we have this culture is because all of like superhero comics or anything were translated in a way that they had to do the titles, they had to do the splash, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
like they had to translate the whatever sound effects were in the comics. So it's kind of like the culture evolved because we have so many comics are translated to Portuguese, you know, and through the effort of like very specific, like my publisher was
Hmm.
like, if he's gonna get somebody to translate comics, it's gotta be somebody who has interest in comics, and the other people that he works with are all people who are either cartoonists or like dedicate themselves to comics,
Yeah.
giving
Yeah, I
comics
mean,
the grace
sign
that literature gets, you know.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, signage and sound effects and lettering, that kind of that is a whole other can of worms. And I think manga has really made Americans sensitive to how important that is
Yes.
as well. And that's none of those kind of like translator notes versus, messing with the art kind of thing, where like different every book you see has some different, like with Yuichi Yokohama and his books like New Engineering and stuff. He's had several different publishers, and I feel like each one has tried sometimes with the same, who's the Japanese Ryan Holberg who does most of
Yeah,
the Japanese
yeah, I was
translation at
gonna
this point.
mention, yeah,
It
yeah.
was great. I feel like even he from version to version, he's like, well, this let's try. I'm gonna just put a little note under each sound to say what it is, or no, let's try and replace the Japanese lettering with an American, English lettering, but that like, because it plays a graphic role as well as a linguistic role, and
And
that's a big challenge.
speaking of the can of worms, like if you made a point that I thought was so insightful, that is like if you put too many translated notes, you're interfering with the rhythm of the story, right?
Yeah.
So when you are, for instance, translating my New York diary, New York is a character in the book.
Mm.
Do I translate if it says pharmacy, or no, you're in America and it's
Yeah. Right.
it in English because it's part of the landscape, you know? So
Yeah.
those kinds of decisions I think are very interesting. I have to attend to my dog real quick. I'm sorry. Like
No problem.
he's barking because he's been trying to take food out of the thing, and one second,
It's
sorry.
okay. See, this is what I was hoping for. That
Well,
I
I'm
would
I'm
say a
pet
few
free here
words
at
and you
the
guys
I'm
would
pet
go right
free, and
in.
the children are actually not home from school yet, so all
Um,
the coast is clear here in the Madden Able homestead.
while she's away, you mentioned that you've read some things. I mean, you mentioned with Poe, but can you think of any comics you've read in both French and English, regardless of which way they were first presented, and
Mm.
like had a different experience with them? Not and preferably even a different experience in a non-negative way, because what I started thinking about when you guys specifically when you said that there were people who thought that Poe was made by the translator,
Yeah.
um is that like every role in comics that are made by small teams rather than individuals is incredibly important. Just like if it's made by an individual, every part of it is important, right? So, like a letterer can have a profound effect on a comic.
Absolutely.
An inker can have a profound effect on a comic. A colorist can have a profound effect on a comic, for positive or negative. But I way prefer talking about the positives. So, can you think of times where you've read something in both languages where you think a translation elevated the book in some way.
Hmm. Um, I'm trying to think if there's stuff like I've read some manga.
And not necessarily like better, but like
Yeah,
good but different.
I've
I
read
don't
some
want you to be
manga
saying, "Oh,
in
the original's not as
English.
good."
I've read some manga in English and in French, and I'm trying to
So
think.
just two different
Hmm,
translations.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the example that comes to mind that's sort of famous uh, in literary translation in general is that back in like the 50s and 60s, I want to say, there was a German woman who translated all the Karl Barks and all the kind of Donald Duck, Scrooge comics in Germany. Um, and uh, and they're massively popular there. I think even to this day, they're still kind of revered as like part of the canon of German language children's literature. And apparently, and I do know some German, but I've never actually seen one of these books to kind of like, and I don't know to the level of being able to suss this out. But apparently, she was able to, and this gets back to what we were talking about earlier about how do you translate tone and language style and accents and kind of cultural stereotypes, But apparently, what she did was she was able to like look at all of the cast of characters in the Scrooge comics and the Duck stories, and kind of map Scrooge and Donald and Goofy and all these characters onto German kind of cultural literary types of characters and in the way they would talk that just like really gelled, like it all came together and really elevated it into this whole its own thing. And not necessarily, I mean, I think, not better than Karl Barks originals, but it had
Right.
some
And
a
just
particular
really
flavor
close
that she brought
quickly,
to it that made it its
it
own
was
thing.
Erica Fuchs
Erica Fuchs, that sounds right.
because it comes up immediately
Yeah.
when you do
Yeah, no,
German
like I said,
translation
I
of
mean, I first
Karl
read it, I read
Barks.
about it before I'd read Karl Barks. Like I read a book about
Right.
Yeah, I did actually take a course in literary translation in college, back in 1989 or something. And this was in one, this anecdote was included as an example of how successful translation can be. So yeah, it's a famous example. Um, but yeah, I'd have to think. I'll keep mulling over whether I've read.
No, that
Um, I've been curious. I read New York Review Comics, who published Pierrot. They published this book. Of kind of sci-fi comics by Chantal Montelier from the 80s that ran in, like in Suivre and different French magazines. And they had been translated in heavy metal back. You guys are doing a series on heavy metal. Is that one of
we
your,
are.
I don't know if you've come
Uh, we, we
across
we've
some
definitely
of
come
her,
across some.
social fiction is the name of the book. And it's like
Um,
three or four kind of longish short stories. And one of them has this kind of, and I'm spacing out on it now, what the conceit is, but there's some kind of like futuristic language that's kind of like it's almost like in Clockwork Orange or something. It's some kind of like weird slang that she made up for this story. And apparently when heavy metal initially translated it, they did such a weird decision of like nonsense language for that particular solution that
so it is the story is 1996.
okay,
And it is so funny that you brought this up because it was also talked about the first issue of the new revised Metal Hurlant.
okay.
Um,
They told the story again.
ki well, Kickstarters have gotten their PDFs, so I finished reading it, and
Hmm.
one of the text articles talked about differing levels of translation that had happened in heavy metal, and specifically brought up this book. And it made me go, okay, I need to go read the new translation because by Jeffrey Brock, I'm looking at the Comics
Yeah.
Journal article right now. Um, because uh in general, like that was the story. We've actually gone through most of it because it was an early heavy metal. And it
Yeah.
was the story that we all kind of wanted to like and just couldn't because of the language. And
Interesting. Yeah.
discovering that that was on the translator makes me go, oh, we so need to reread this in the
Yeah.
different translation and see what we think. I mean, it was literally already in my head. I need to go find the other translations so that we can do an episode where we just compare the
Absolutely. Yeah,
translations.
no, I would definitely be curious to hear that. And I would like to actually find the French original at some point too, because I have not.
Right.
I'm familiar with her a little bit before, but I have not read her stuff in French. So yeah.
Well, maybe I'll get on that and see if we can include you because that would be totally cool to have, us four Luddite English speaking only white guys with at least somebody who knows another language. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, actually, even just looking at the Comics Journal article and seeing a couple of the pages they have, you can see the different translation and how much of a difference it winds up
Yeah.
making. Because among other things, is even, I mean, uh, literally, I'm trying to remember the name of the game. There's a game that my wife always likes to play because it winds up silly because like it breaks the words down into word sounds and you just have to say the sounds until they can figure out what Mad Gab is the name of the
Okay.
game, and
Okay.
yeah, but it's like it's like a party game where
Yeah.
it's like you so
Yeah.
okay, and actually sometimes it like actually has other words, and you have to try to figure out, do I say them faster, do I say them slower, for them to manage to figure out what it's supposed to be.
Mm.
So it could be so shall. um I don't know how we do fiction, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
um Reading 1996 in heavy metal almost felt like that. It's like
Yeah.
I have to like disconnect my brain and
Right.
say it out loud and figure out what sounds it's trying to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they talk about the introduction to the new collection too, and
Okay.
wonder if that's why she never caught on in the U.S. because that like really kind of stopped her career
I
in its
mean
tracks.
that's exactly
Readers, yeah,
exactly what it
metal.
was saying in the Metal Hurlant is
Yeah.
wondering if part of her. And it gave the title of that, which is why I already had it bookmarked. Oh, I need to go check this out. Um, yeah. Well, we're running up on an hour. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've loved listening to the two of you go back and forth.
I
I,
also would be remiss not to say, Matt, that I didn't realize you were the Matt Madden from 99 Ways to Tell a Story. I
That's me.
absolutely love that book so much.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I was a TA for my late friend Carl Bogner here in Milwaukee. Uh, he would use that book in his film 101 class.
Oh, wonderful. I love hearing about it being used in outside other than comics classes, so
Yeah.
film and literature and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's like he was very like the program was very experimental, so it made perfect sense for the program too.
that's great. Well,
And
that
I'm
book was
you'll sign my copy.
excellent. There was uh, there's a translation, there's a full translation in Brazil, but it was going to be published about 10 years ago now by a publisher called Cossack Naife,
Yeah,
which had done like Kano and they were pretty, it sounds like they were a great publisher, but they went bankrupt or closed for whatever reason.
I know it was like apocalyptic, kind of
Yeah.
diamond moment.
Yeah, so and I'm talking to people in Brazil, occasionally about, trying to find a new publisher for it. I've reached out to the translator. He still is sitting on the translation somewhere. Maybe you can review it at some point. I do actually have, I can hold up here for you, although we're not, this is an audio video thing.
it's audio, so but oh, look at that.
My story Bridge,
Oh, nice.
which is published up by Koosh Comics as a mini comic, and it's in my
Right.
new book, Six Treasures of the Spiral, is going to be published in a similar, smaller, mini comic format like this,
Oh, nice.
by a newish publisher called Ugra
Okay,
in Brazil. It's like a store. Um,
kind
um,
of familiar. I'm Googling here to
yeah,
see.
it's I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember the
I
guy's
think
name,
it's
Douglas.
Press, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So my friend, you might know Maria Clara Carneiro, who's like a
Yeah.
comics academic. she's sort of always trying to find ways to get my stuff published over there. And so they're going to publish, they've been doing like a zine festival through a store, and they're starting to branch into publishing. So I think I'm going to be one of their first proper books, but that'll be my first
Very cool.
book published in Brazil, which is funny because my first ambition to get published in Brazil was to do a mini tonto with Fabio many years
Ah,
ago. And even actually my story drawn onward, which ended up, it would have been too large a format, but it was originally published in this like comic book size.
oh,
But
nice.
when I
Yeah.
first had the idea back in 2005 or so, I was like, oh, maybe I'll do this and send it to Fabio and we'll do it as a mini tonto. But I think he stopped doing those years ago. But
I think I have a number of them. Like, uh, it's funny because the first time you mentioned him, I got him confused with Alan Seeber. And
yeah, well, I think they collaborate. I mean, I have
yeah,
a mini tonto from Alan Sieber. I mean,
yeah,
they're part of that same generation, I think.
yes, yeah, and I was very good friends with Adão, Garay, who does like I think he's published in French a lot. He does the Gay Cowboys, Rock and Hudson. Sorry.
Oh, sounds great. I'm not
I know
familiar.
it's really funny. It's really
Yeah.
funny. But a lot of the comics artists in Brazil, and he was part of the people in Chiclete com Banana. Like
Yeah.
they had a thing, it was called like Los Three Amigos, and he was like the fourth amigo, kind of.
Right.
So
He
he's
was like,
D'Artagnan.
yeah, because he was a little younger than the other
There you
guys.
go.
I think Fabio, and they're all kind of like a little bit younger
Yeah.
than that other generation.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I forgot what I was gonna say that, but I know he has a international career because he lived in France. Oh, what I was gonna say is that a lot of the comics artists in Brazil got specialized in strips because that's how they all got published in the newspaper
Yeah.
in Brazil. So even the alternative comics, it was rare to see like a longer story, which it was a pity because whenever they would publish longer stories in Chiclete com Banana or like
Yeah.
it would be so awesome.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah. Even Fabio did Simberes did a daily strip for a few
yeah,
years.
yeah, for Na Folha, yeah, and the biggest
Yeah.
newspaper actually.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
So my parting question,
yeah.
and it's my normal parting question, except that I'm going to put a mild twist on it because we're talking translations.
mhm.
I'm requiring that you give me translated works. I don't care which way they're translated, but tell me something you love that not enough people around you have experienced, preferably comic, preferably storytelling, but we have no rules, and is translated that you want more people to read, watch, listen to, whatever, so that you can talk to it about them
Well,
or
you can
talk
be,
to them about it.
yeah.
And you don't have to stick to one.
All right. I'll give
Well,
one. I feel like last time I was on, I feel like I'm becoming
You
a
get you
shill for
gave your
New
two,
comics. So I mentioned Piero, I think, but I'm going to
right?
mention
Well, and Zabim.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, that's how we got on this whole translation thing, I think.
Exactly.
So, another book that was not translated by me, but was published by New York Review Comics, and I think did not get near enough attention, is a book called Note to the Survivors by GB, which is Gebe with accents on the E's. And it was translated by my friend Edward Gauvin, who's a guy who's done a lot of translation of comics. And also, I think he's got a specialty in Belgian science fiction, I believe. He does a lot of different stuff. And it's for me, it's the one that got away. When I first heard about the New York Review Comics and they reached out to me because they'd seen the Zabim sisters and they'd say, "Hey, we love what you're translating. That's the kind of stuff we want to do at New York Review." And I started talking about Baudouin, who's very underrepresented in English too. But one of the top of my list was, oh, I'll get this because no one has heard of this book called
I will say that it's at least at the New York Review Comics site, it's Letter to Survivors.
Letter to Survivors. Yeah. Um, and so I was like, oh, the book I really want to do is Letter to Survivors by J.B. It's really obscure but really great. And they're like, no, we're already doing it. Edward Gauvin is translating it. I was so jealous. But I was also very pleased. And I hate Reddit when it came out. I was like, I'm gonna find every mistake he made. But he actually did a fantastic job. It's a wonderful book, and it's like such a strange. It was written in the 80s, I think, and it's sort of some level of satire on the nuclear age and the nuclear family. GB is a really interesting character in French kind of counterculture. He's sort of like almost like a Crumb, Gilbert Shelton underground type of character who published in a lot of like magazines back in the 70s and 80s. But it also has the incredible invention that harkens back to the French literature I love, like Raymond Roussel and Raymond Queneau, and the experimental absurdist strain of French weird writing. Um, and also, it looks forward to writers now, like someone like Cesar Ira, the Argentinian writer who's very hot right now, who writes these like weird improvised fantastical novellas that you never know what's going to happen from one page to the next. It has that kind of like zany energy to it as well. That just like it's a short work, easy to find. You can probably find it on sale at this point. Probably came out probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I can't recommend it enough. It's a great book. Chris, do you have any? Do you have one?
Yeah, I have like all the Brazilian stuff in comics. There's Listen Beautiful Marcia, which is a beautiful comic. Forgetting the name of the guy. Sorry. This is the fuck Marcelo Quintanilha. It's published by Fantagraphics. There's also a collection that Fantagraphics put out called Braba, B BABRA. And
Yep.
that's so in comics, those are the ones that I would recommend that are like have very good translations in English. And in terms of literature, it would be definitely read Clarice Lispector because you're not going to want to read anything else in the rest of your life. And also Machado de Assis, the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas and
Yeah, that's on my list. I've never read that.
oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
And so those two, and Fernando Pessoa, like a Portuguese author that has a lot of his books are translated to English too, and well translated. That's it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much. Hold on just a second so I can make certain I get some of those things written down properly, but I'm going to take us out first. It's been wonderful, wonderful hearing more about this thing that's always fascinated me, but I haven't even known how to dig into it because languages scare me. I wish that they didn't. I wish that my brain was wired properly, but it doesn't seem to be. And nobody got to me early,
That's pretty
which
key.
seems to be the key. Yeah. So,
But it's never too late. I really
yeah.
think it's definitely harder to learn languages once you're older, and especially, past the age of 8, the critical period for language learning. But, you can learn, you know, Duolingo is not going to do the trick probably, but, go take a summer off and go live abroad somewhere. And that you got to throw yourself in.
I mean that requires the finances to take the summer off and live abroad.
Take a student group to France for the summer.
We'll see. For Matt Madden, for Cris Siqueira, this has been 22 Panels. We'll see you after the next page.
Hey guys, this is Tyler from 22 Panels. I'm here to tell you all about our Patreon. If you enjoy this show, please consider donating to our Patreon to keep this show going. We have many different tiers, all different levels to help you decide what's right for you. Okay, so get on out there to patreon.com/22 Panels Podcast.